fighting game fans, what is up? It is I, FGF Chris, and you're listening to Twilight Hadoukens. And today I have some good news and I have some bad news. I think we'll do the bad news first. The bad news is we're going to be talking about censorship in fighting games. No one likes this topic because censorship flat out sucks. But the good news is, afterwards, we're going to be talking about the polar opposite of censorship, and that is fan service. Woo! Good shit, right? So if you guys don't already know, censorship is basically a form of political correctness that bombards itself into any form of multimedia, whether it's music, movies, anime, fighting games, video games, whatever. Any form of entertainment, certain people are like, oh, that's not suitable for children, or oh, it's too graphic, and we're trying to aim for kind of like a young demographic. You know, like E for everybody, or T for teen. And in fighting games, there was tons and tons of this political correct censorship that basically took the fun out of fighting games. And it's unfortunate that they do this stuff. I mean, I could see why they do it. Obviously, you don't want a little kid to see something very graphic, very violent, sexually explicit. But at the same time, when you're a kid, you want to see more of this type of stuff, you know, especially if you're in your teen years. And one big famous form of censorship that came out for the fighting games, and I think this was the very first form of censorship. Well, actually there's two around that same time. The first one worth mentioning is Mortal Kombat. There was a release on the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and those games were the very first Mortal Kombat game that has ever graced the systems. On the Super Nintendo, they got rid of the blood and gore altogether, because they wanted to make Super Nintendo a family-friendly system. Understandable. Except they made the blood gray in color in it. But that's pretty much the violence that you see is gray blood flying out of your enemies. And on the Sega Genesis version, they had a special blood code that you could enter to see the blood and gore of the game. And I kind of find that a little bit silly and redundant. Any 5-year-old could pick up a game and enter in a code to enable certain features. The other fighting game series I want to mention that had heavy censorship, in the Fatal Fury series, the Real Bout series to be precise, the United States release of Real Bout Fatal Fury and Real Bout Fatal Fury Special changed the color of the blood of the characters that you beat up. And they didn't change the color to something that worked necessarily. In Real Bout Fatal Fury, when it was released in American ports, the blood was green. So whenever you get hit or you hit your enemy, basically you see this like puke looking, like diarrhea green flying across the screen out of the enemy onto the ground. And I thought, oh my god, technically green blood is a lot more disturbing than red blood in my opinion. And in Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, they had white blood. And it's like, not to be disgusting on this show, but there's white bodily fluids that are kind of not meant to be seen in a video game. And that's what it reminds me of. It's ridiculous. Censorship is really awful. Not only does like blood and gore get censored massively in certain fighting games and video games, any form of tobacco, alcohol, or skimpily dressed girls were kind of censored in a lot of the older fighting games as well. In fact, some of the modern ones even are careful of what they include or what they're going to exclude. A good example is King of Fighters from 94 to 98, to be precise. There was two characters that in the beginning scene of them fighting, they would drink alcohol or have an alcoholic drink in their hand. The one character is known as King, who's this female kickboxer from the Art of Fighting series, and she has a martini glass. And in the U.S. release, they got rid of it, back in the day. And with Ralph Jones, he had a bottle of beer that he threw on the ground. So they got rid of that too. So alcoholism is like, no, no, we don't want to have any alcoholic drinks in this game. No way. And when it comes to skimpily dressed girls, in Fatal Fury, and I know I'm focusing a lot on SNK, but SNK's really, really put down the hammer with censorship in America. In Japan, hey, it's fair game, but in America, they're like, no, 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 don't mess with that. But Mai Shiranui in Fatal Fury, Fatal Fury 2 and Fatal Fury Special to be precise, had had her butt censored. Basically, she looked like she was wearing red underwear that covered her butt cheeks in America. In Japan, it was like a thong, you know? They also, especially in the King of Fighters games, made Mai's boobs not bounce at all. Like, if you play King of Fighters 2000 for the PS2, her boobs do not bounce at all. And it's kind of like, oh man, I want to see Mai's boobs bounce. What's up with this? But you can't. But over the years, fighting games have been a little bit more lenient on what they're going to show that resembles sexuality or provocativeness. And they were a lot more easygoing nowadays than they were in the past. Another example of modern censorship, in Street Fighter V, Chung Li, the female kung fu practitioner of the Street Fighter series, her boobs originally were supposed to be like super jiggly. And in America, they basically stopped the jiggle. They basically made her boobs look like she had a brawl on or something without, like, her boobs bouncing everywhere and junk. I know it sounds really sexist to say stuff like this, but I'm just keeping it real, really. This is what people have to face when they look at censorship and, all that jazz. Not only do, like, the physical appearance of characters and what they're doing are getting censored, you also have censorship with names and titles of games changing. For example, Rival Schools, and I mentioned this before, mentioned Rival Schools before, is pretty popular, and I like that game. It's very popular in Japan, not in America. Rival Schools had a sequel called Project Justice. In America, it was called Project Justice, but in Japan, it was originally going to be called Rival Schools 2. And there's a theory behind why they changed the name in America to Project Justice. And that would be because of insensitivity to some school massacres and school shootings in the United States. And it is, I understand why they changed the name to, honor the dead and not make their title sound harsh or anything for the game. But and it is unfortunate, the violence in America. But like at the same time though, they shouldn't have changed the name, in my opinion. And I don't want to get super political here or anything, but calling a game Rival Schools isn't going to incite violence. I know it might sound tad insensitive, but it's not going to incite violence. And I kind of feel like they should have called it Rival Schools 2 in America. But that's just my personal opinion, and I respect the people that don't agree with me. It's whatever. Apples and oranges, right? So anyway, that's censorship in a nutshell. Now we'll talk about fan service. Let's lighten up the mood a bit. With fan service, it could range anywhere between having a popular culture reference, having a guest character in the game that you really wanted to see, having a cutscene that basically touches a fan's heart, or it could just be like giant bouncing boobs like in Dead or Alive, and skimpily dressed people, whether they're girls or guys. There's fan service for everyone, really. And yeah, so with fan service, one game always pops in my mind when anyone ever says fan service, and that would be Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive is a game by Tecmo that came out uh, late 90s, early 2000s. And basically, like, it's a bunch of girls and a few guys dressed up very skimpily, fighting each other, and you get to see their boobs bounce, panty shots, and kicking ass. And it's not for everyone, but, if you're a horny teenager, you'd probably dig it. And not only that, like, fan service can also be tied with crossovers, like, Marvel vs. Capcom, Capcom vs. SNK, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Anything with the word Capcom in it, evidently. But, I mean, there's other crossovers out there, too. But, like, it's having like a certain guest character, a certain reference thrown at you makes you laugh and makes you feel like, wow, this game is really speaking to me. Fan service is freaking awesome. And even fan service could be goofy and dumb at times too. And, for example, Capcom's Dan Hibiki. He is basically a mockery character that was based off of the Kyokujin fighting team of the Art of Fighting series, which consists of Robert Garcia, Ryo Sakazaki, and Yuri Sakazaki. And it's an SNK game. But Dan Hibiki is a character that was created by Capcom making fun of those SNK characters. And they did a really good job with it. And I remember when I was playing Street Fighter Alpha 3, I remember the win quote that Dan Hibiki had. And it said, "I want to be the king of fighters, but I hate the art of fighting." And that is basically a love letter from Capcom saying, hey SNK, we still got your back. We still have fans of yours that are going to laugh at that win quote. And that is true cool fan service. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just crossovers, references. It is great. Trying to think of other stuff. Obviously, if you play BlazBlue or Guilty Gear, there's a lot of like cutesy, chibi type fan service. Like a lot of elements that add like a charm to the game. Like for example, in Guilty Gear Rev 2. Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2, which is one of the later Guilty Gear games that came out in 2017, had a tutorial mode, and it was a very interesting tutorial mode because one of the most cute characters named Jacko in the game would give you this really fun interactive tutorial that you would be basically guided to know how to play the game. And it was just so well done, so charismatic. You can't spell fan service without charisma. Well, you can because, charisma is not in the word fan service. You know what I mean? But, yeah, just stuff like that. Like, seeing certain... Oh yeah, shoot. Before I forget, Capcom vs. SNK had the best fan service, especially the second game, Capcom vs. SNK 2. They had special character intros where they would interact with each other from each different franchise or, company, parent company. And it was just wonderful just to see that type of interaction in the game. Really, really cool stuff. Yeah, I definitely like fan service. I hate censorship. Censorship's lame. It needs to take a hike. Get its butt out of there. But fan service, damn straight. Well, anyways, guys, I'm gonna hang it up here. Keep watching the Twilight Hadoukens. You guys take care. Peace out.